the common factor. The common factors with psychedelic therapies and the mindfulness approaches, and there are no doubt distinctions, just pointing at these particular two factors, which Aaron Beck, one of the fathers of cognitive therapy, one of the innovators of cognitive behavioral therapy, discussed the decentering process, which is not taking things personally, and the psychological distance. And I believe that both therapeutic approaches provide for this, and the results can be highly beneficial. There is, of course, a problem about habitual use or the abuse of any substance. And, discussing substances from a harm reduction perspective, which I assume that perspective. I do not think that it's a good idea to just dismiss substances and botanicals. They are here to stay. It's also a possibility that mushrooms, for example, have been left to us by nature as a medicine. Of course, this is a psychoactive medicine, and that it may help us to develop a better relationship with our environment and reduce some of the harm that we tend to create for ourselves. We and our environment are one and the same. An example of that would be, for example, that bees actually arrive to a garden after the garden is fully created. In other words, first we have the garden that sustains the bee before the bee arrives. A bee does not come before a garden. The human being has not arrived on the earth prior to the earth's capacity to fulfill its needs. Okay, so we do need to honor our environment. Probably we are not doing that good a job at it, in that the population is growing. Reverence for the environment is a critical survival mechanism, if you will. And indeed, I mean, I believe that life is quite divine, and nature must be recognized as not competing with a moral oriented deity. It's not, we don't want to have a competition going here. However, I do clearly believe that we must recognize life as sacred. Here too also, folks, there is another aspect that both mindfulness and psychedelics provide for, and that is an empathy. With the reduction of self-consciousness, and what I'm pointing to is the differentiation between what we call ourselves and our environment. That is actually a system. It is one thing. However, nature has provided us a sense of separation that supports our survival. That same support can become pathological also, and where we have a callous indifference to the environment. We all share also and of course this is my argument to you, we all share a common identity, and that certainly can be debated, but however, I'll go forward with that point of view. We are all nature itself, living in the field of nature. We are actually standing, so to speak, in our own heart. We are inside something, and yet we feel that we have an outside and an inside. Point is that there is some callous indifference occurring towards life itself. The slaughter of animals should be done with a reverence. I don't mean to should the world. However, I think that there are negative outcomes from our callous indifference. Chickens, for example, all put in a cage, living very close to one another and suffering madness before they're slaughtered, probably is not good for us. These are not objects of indifference. A chicken wants very much to live and to not die. It wants to eat and not be eaten, just like yourself and myself. We would certainly prefer to live rather than not live. We prefer to eat rather than be eaten. However, that is not the nature of our world, which touches on this other element of suffering. It is basically that what we're looking at is actually what is looking. Many of us are not aware that as Joseph Campbell had suggested, a wonderful commentator on mythology, that there are indeed rivers of blood that sustain us. We are sustained by the sacrifice of the life, and we are that life also. We need to understand that the law of life also applies to us. Sacrifice is a part of our lives also. We shall be sacrificed, so to speak, even as we sacrifice. So that is a perspective that we can awaken to. I would say even in spiritual circles, sometimes that point is missed, even by sophisticated representatives. They continue to have very strong anthropocentricity. They really do not realize the singularity of identity. And therefore compassion, the infinite compassion that is associated with the Buddha, which is associated with LSD, less so with perhaps psilocybin, but nonetheless with the mushroom also, is important. This may help our behavior. And so I just want to talk about very briefly harm, because it has been suggested that these substances can harm us. However, they may well help us in their medicinal use, in their use as a entheogenic substance, and that's entheo in God creating substance. They are a sacramental herbs, and we do have a spiritual experience confirmed by numerous people who have taken it, and also some research done on the subject. They can change behavior, and they can change political perspectives. They can change culture to perhaps a gentler and less violent perspective. And so when we think about harm that can occur from the continuing the research, for example, on LSD, we also need to think about the possibility that this may save millions of lives, that this change in consciousness can actually help us, that because we are harming ourselves, and we do need to dare to look into other ways of helping ourselves. And if indeed psychedelics can be helpful to stop us from slaughtering one another, for example, and also, if I may, the slaughtering of cattle and chickens, for example, slaughtering them with irreverence. This is not helpful for us. Callous indifference produces callous indifference. We then when we deny this or are unaware of it, we have these intrusive symptoms that can occur. The denial process tends to do that, and we can have events, for example, where there is callous violence towards the population with gross indifference, and it may indeed be a reflection of some of the norms of our culture. So this was a conversation about mindfulness-based anxiety reduction, its relationship to psychedelic therapies as described by Stanislav Grof. Stanislav Grof also has innovated a breath work, holotropic breath work he calls it, but he was one of the early investigators of LSD and other psychedelics, and helped in the establishing of protocols to continue an investigation into these the therapeutic value of using these substances. Very fine talking with you, and the book, of course, is Mindfulness-Based Anxiety Reduction, and we'll look forward to seeing you in 2013. I'll be providing some further tapes and discussions. Thank you for tuning in.